Finally, Sean Hannity tells the truth. It's disconcerting to see a man who has made a living by arguing and dealing with hard facts suddenly talk about something really emotional. Sean Hannity, one of the most well-known conservative media speakers in the US, did just that not too long ago. At 63, after years of political discussion, primetime TV, and interviews that made headlines, Hannity finally let his guard down and talked about something much more human than politics or power. Love. Fans weren't the only ones who were surprised by his emotional statement about the lady he calls the love of his life. It made a man they thought they knew less keen. But did they really? I worked as a dishwasher when I was 12, a cook when I was 13, a busboy, a waiter, and a bartender for a long time. After that, I worked as a painter. I put up wallpaper. I built the frames for houses. I was working on a building. I listened to talk radio all day long. And one day I'm in Santa Barbara, California. I also learned that the nearby college has Sean Patrick Hannity, who was born in Queens, New York in 1961. The youngest of 4 kids in a close-knit Irish-American household. Hugh, his father, was a court official, and Lillian, his mother, was a correctional officer at a county jail. It wasn't a life of luxury, but it was a life of discipline and community. People who knew Sean as a child say he was quite headstrong, which can either drive parents nuts or lead to greatness later on. He was just another youngster in the neighborhood while he grew up in Franklin Square, Long Island. He did odd jobs, mowed lawns, and played with anything he could find. But it was the sound of the radio that initially attracted his attention. Hannity would listen to talk radio late at night when most youngsters were asleep. Intrigued by how a speaker's voice may start a discourse in a whole country, Hannity realized he didn't want a typical 9-to-5 job while he was in his early 20s. He worked in a lot of different fields, including construction, painting, and even bartending. But he couldn't stop thinking about a microphone and an audience. He got his first genuine break when he got a volunteer job at a college radio station in California. It was little, rough, and unpaid, but to Sean, it was the most important thing in the world. Hannity started at a small station in California and then moved on to bigger ones. He eventually had shows in Alabama and Georgia. Producers noticed his unrelenting ambition and saw that he could do more than just radio. It was the right time. America was entering a time when political talk shows were becoming important parts of culture. And Hannity's aggressive manner was just what networks wanted. His life changed instantly in 1996. Fox News, which was then a new and ambitious network, asked him to co-host a new show with leftist pundit Alan Colmes. The show Hannity and Colmes was an instant success. The tension of two philosophies clashing every night drew in viewers, and Hannity loved it. He didn't just argue, he made people listen. Years later, when the Sean Hannity Show started as a solo show, his voice became one of the most famous in the country. He talked to presidents, challenged policies, and sometimes got into trouble. But one thing stayed the same through it all: his drive. Hannity wasn't as loud while he was behind the camera, though. People who know him well say that he is surprisingly reticent off the air and cherishes loyalty, privacy, and faith. The broadcaster was the person that America saw on TV every night. But the man who wasn't on film was quite thoughtful. He would often talk about his faith, his family, and the little things he missed from his youth, like Sunday dinners, hearing his parents' voices, and the kind of honesty that comes from having a humble background. A lot of people who know Sean Hannity could tell that he did well in pandemonium at work, but he really wanted peace in his personal life. And that's when his story takes a turn for the worst. I really do believe that I couldn't do anything on my own. I think that everything we have in this world is a gift from God. Sean Hannity was just a young radio presenter trying to make it before he became famous and worked for Fox News. He met the woman who would form a big part of his life story during those early years. Jill Rodas. In Huntsville, Alabama, Jill worked as a reporter for a small newspaper. When she first heard Hannity's voice on the radio, he would call her for story ideas. Soon, those business conversations morphed into personal ones. They were both young, driven, and eager to establish a name for themselves. There was a spark that quickly turned into something bigger. They got married in 1993. The ceremony wasn't very fancy. It was straightforward, sincere, and full of hope from two individuals who were ready to take on the world together. Hannity often said that Jill was the one who kept him grounded and calm. Their family developed along with his job. In 1998, they had their first child, a son called Patrick. Their daughter Mary Kelly was born 3 years later. People who knew Hannity during that time often saw a different side of him. The dad who came to tennis matches. The husband who made sure his family kept close even while he was busy. But becoming famous usually comes with a price. As Hannity's career took off, the hard hours, incessant travel, and scrutiny of stardom started to wear on him. His marriage was slowly falling apart. He never talked about it in public. He never does, but many who know them well believe that living in the public eye for years steadily constructed an unseen wall between them. Sean and Jill decided to break up in 2019, after being together for more than 20 years. There was no drama or scandal after the divorce, as is generally the case with celebrity breakups. They didn't say anything unpleasant or do any tell-all interviews. They were just two individuals who had lived together decided to go their separate ways. But if you pay attention, that silence says a lot. It demonstrated respect for each other and for their kids. Hannity and Rhodes continued to co-parent with amazing grace even after they broke up. Their kids were still the most important thing to them, and acquaintances say Hannity was very active in their lives. Patrick's father was always there for him, especially when he was playing tennis at Wake Forest University. Hannity was also a caring parent for Mary, always making time for her sports and schoolwork. That time was hard for Sean, though, in private. He was a man who was used to being in charge of things, like talks, stories, and public opinion. But you can't control love, and you can't talk about loss. People who worked with him observed a small change during that time. The man who used to fill every pause with conviction started to talk a bit more slowly and ponder a little more deeply. He began to spend more time thinking, relying on his faith and the calm parts of his life. Friends say he became more private than ever, not recluse, but protective. He stopped talking about relationships altogether, even when people asked him funny questions about dating over the air. A lot of people thought that Sean Hannity had decided that love wasn't for him anymore. But there was something else going on behind that guarded face. A gentle, peaceful realization of what love could be like the second time around. He had been famous and then not famous, had been successful and then failed, and had his heart broken. He had made a career that took up all of his time and had learnt that not everything in life can be planned out like a TV program. So when he talked about finding the love of his life at 63 years old years later, it meant something else. No, Sean Hannity is a right-wing person. There's no pretending here. Not Ted Koppel. I am a person. It's clear that this is a conservative show. I genuinely do believe that I couldn't do anything without help. I think that everything we have in this world is a gift. After his marriage dissolved, Sean Hannity didn't make any big declarations or statements to the press. He just kept doing what he always did, turning up. Millions of people watched him every night give keen political analysis and honest commentary. But when the camera was off, his world was calm. People who knew him well claimed that he began to put moments ahead of achievements. He got back in touch with old acquaintances, spent time with his kids, and even started doing things that had nothing to do with politics or TV. That change was tremendous for a man whose life was always full of deadlines. But don't get me wrong, Hannity's career never slowed down. His show continued to be popular, making it one of the most listened to shows in the United States. His nightly TV show was still quite popular. But there was something about him that felt different. There was still a furious tone, but behind it was a man learning how to balance things. He once made a passing comment that made it sound like he had understood how important it is to be thankful for the things that really count, like health, faith, family, and peace. He didn't appear to care about getting approval anymore. That understanding was huge for someone who had spent decades in the tempest of American media. During those quiet years, Hannity created a regimen that was based on being consistent. Get up early, work out, pray, and then go to work. His co-workers stated he became very disciplined, like a monk. He didn't go to high-profile parties, date in public, or spread rumors. He was quite protective of his solitude, but deep down, he still wanted something. Not necessarily for love, but for friendship, the kind that makes you feel like someone is watching you when the cameras are off. No one is immune to loneliness, no matter how successful they are. And for Hannity, who had created a wall around his private life, it was going to be hard to let someone back in. He didn't know that the next part of his story was already waiting for him in the same building. Someone who had been through love, loss, and strength on their own route. You got a divorce, but your faith helped you stay strong through it all. Yes, that was a tough time for me, but we get along and co-parent well. I've worked at Fox News for 14 years, and my name is Hannity Hart. Hannity Hart was more than simply another TV star. She was someone who had made a name for herself in the tough world of broadcast journalism. Hannity was born and raised in South Carolina. She brought a sense of grace and cheerfulness to her profession and swiftly rose through the ranks to become one of Fox's most popular morning hosts. But there was a woman behind that bright smile and serene demeanor who had been through a lot of pain. She had been married twice, but neither marriage lasted, and she was now a single mother raising her small daughter, Hayden. Her faith was like a compass that helped her stay steady through all of life's ups and downs. Sean and Hannity's paths were similar in many ways. They had both been on the same network before. Both had been through public scrutiny and were learning how to rebuild their lives after losing someone. Their chemistry started out slowly, based on friendship. They had worked together for years at Fox Studios, where they met. But at some point, everything changed. People who used to talk about work started to talk about more personal things. Hannity looked up to Sean for his religion, discipline, and dedication to his kids. Sean liked how strong, warm, and positive she always was. There was respect on both sides. It didn't take long for co-workers to notice. They typically hung out with the same people and went to the same events. But even as rumors started to spread, both Hannity and Hart stayed quiet. They never said yes or no to anything, and they chose to keep their relationship private. Sean did that on purpose. He didn't want to let the world into his heart again after going through the scrutiny of a public marriage. But people who were close to him saw that he acted differently when Hannity was there. He laughed a lot more. He was lighter. She brought forth a softness that wasn't often seen on TV. Their friendship was based on their similar beliefs, which included faith, family, and the idea that everything happens in its own time. They started going to church together, where they frequently sat quietly in the back with the rest of the people. There were no red carpets, magazine covers, or dazzling romance, but it was true. They made a relationship based on understanding instead of show. When Hannity started leading her Bible study groups, Sean became one of her biggest supporters at work. He would praise her thoughts on the air and tell people to watch. He would tell his buddies how much he respected her way of thinking and how she was able to stay nice in a world that rewards fighting. It wasn't opposites that brought them together, but similarities that brought them together. They were both well-known people with private lives. Both of them were looking for something real in an industry that is all about looks. Even though they didn't talk much, their friendship started to change into something deeper. And even though neither of them wanted to say it out loud, everyone who saw them together could tell. This connection was good for Hannity, who had been hiding his feelings for years. Hannity thought of it as a sign that love may find you when you least expect it, even after a breakup. Then came the moment that altered everything. The confession that would make the news and remind everyone that love can give even the most guarded heart strength. Hannity Hart. You were with us at the con. First of all, well done on the book. Thanks a lot. It wasn't during a planned interview or a political program. It wasn't loud or exciting. It was easy. The kind of moment that comes out of nowhere and stays with you. Sean Hannity, who was noted for being calm and sure of himself, was speaking more quietly than normal. His tone wasn't the loud, sure voice of a man defending his views. It was the kind honesty of someone who has held a secret for a long time. He started talking about being thankful for the people who are there for you when things go tough. Then, without missing a beat, he made his statements personal. He said he had found someone who understood him, who had been there for him through good times and bad, and who he considered the love of his life. For a moment, the typically fiery presenter appeared like a normal person, not a political commentator or a media behemoth. He was just a 63-year-old man who knew how beautiful second chances are. People were shocked. They didn't think Hannity didn't have feelings. The reason was that they had never seen him show them so openly before. He had always kept that aspect of himself secret, hardly ever talking about family or relationships. He didn't say who they were. He didn't have to. People who had followed his trip knew exactly who he was talking about. The timing and the way he spoke with love. Everything pointed to an Inslee. It wasn't simply what they said that made the moment so strong. His genuineness, the pauses, and the small smile that covered his face when he remarked, "At this stage in my life, I'm just grateful. I found someone who makes me better every single day." That line alone changed everything. Not only how the world regarded Sean Hannity, but also how he saw himself. The man who used to hide behind his work was gone. Someone who had lived long enough to know that real power comes from being weak stepped in his place. It's evident that Sean Hannity, who is 63 years old, is starting a new chapter in his life. It turns out that the most important thing he learned after decades of talking about the state of the nation wasn't political at all. It was personal. It was about understanding that love doesn't care about time or what other people think, and that sometimes the best things in life happen while no one is watching. Hey everyone, thanks so much for letting Lilmy join your fantastic Bible study. I could always use extra prayers, I guess. We all live in the best country God ever given, man. Sean Hannity's confession spread far beyond his typical audience. People who had been following him for years were surprised. There was no spin, no big announcement to get attention, just honesty. It was unusual for a man who made a living by being tough to display that kind of kindness. The media world acted immediately. Some fans said it was unexpected, some said it was refreshing, and for many, it made him more relatable. His honesty didn't affect his reputation at work. It made it deeper. In a time when being real is hard to come by, the moment reminded people that being open isn't a sign of weakness. It brought many of his longtime fans even closer to him. And for Sean, it seemed to be a turning moment in his life. He started to let go of the guardedness that had always been there. He didn't just start telling everyone everything. He is still a private person, but there was a clear warmth and peace that came from understanding that love was no longer something to hide. He wasn't trying to change at 63. He was accepting the truth, which was full of thankfulness, friendship, and the peaceful assurance that comes from being appreciated for who you are, not what you do. And that could have been the most important thing he said. It wasn't just a personal realization. It reminded me that even those who seem larger than life are still looking for the same simple truths: connection, acceptance, and love that lasts. It's not only about Sean Hannity finding love again as an adult. It's about having the guts to start over. The first thing we learn from his narrative is that it's never too late to be happy. Hannity admitted his crime at the age of 63, which is when most individuals think their tale is already over. But his story shows us that life may still surprise us, that love doesn't have a time limit, and that happiness can come long after the storm has passed. The second lesson is about being open. In a culture where strength is typically thought of as being stoic, Hannity's transparency revealed that real strength may sometimes be found in being vulnerable. He didn't lose power by being honest about his feelings. He got deeper. He reminded millions that being strong doesn't mean you can't display emotion. It makes it bigger. Then there's the lesson about being thankful. Hannity didn't make his love story sound like a big win. He put it in a good light. He talked like someone who had learned the hard way that being successful doesn't mean much if you don't have somebody to share it with. After everything he'd gone through, that feeling of gratitude made his confession very emotional. And maybe the most important thing to remember is this: people do change. Sean Hannity is not the same man he was 20 years ago when the world saw him. He has changed from being angry and restless to being thoughtful and grateful. Hannity's confession made it evident that the human heart never stops beating. It keeps hoping and waiting, and when the time is finally right, it finds what it's been looking for all along: love.